I love y'all. Jamal, I love you. I love you. I love you. Stay. Don't go. But yes, please. So they have had major influence over what the workforce. You heard a discussion earlier today about the workforce housing in Anne Arundel County and the impact of workforce housing, and the teachers played a major role in trying to decide what workforce housing looked like and how workforce housing, middle income housing looks in this county. And we also heard that a lot of the people who were served by the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership were Black women who were working in the healthcare field. And they also could not afford a lot of the housing that we have, because Anne Arundel County has the highest cost of housing in the Baltimore metro region, in the Baltimore area. So the area median income is what determines, the cost of housing. You know that, President Korona. So the president's influence over 7,000?
We have 6,700 members, about 7,700.
Okay, 6,700 members, right? That's what you said? People working in and around Anne Arundel County. This is a major leader we have with us today, and I'm very grateful that she decided to join us this afternoon. And I do apologize for starting off a little late, and hopefully we can continue to move forward. So with all the work that you do, I'm very grateful, a Baltimore City resident, so you got to hear some of the police accountability issues related to that as well. We here in the NAACP have been working for a very long time around education issues. Our education chair, Mary Dodoni, is here. Dr. Dodoni, please wave, thank you. And she has been working to receive complaints that come to the NAACP regarding the school system, and also work through a lot of the systemic issues regarding the school system. That's not our discussion today. We are going to be hearing about organizing for workers' rights and justice for all, and so grateful that your training, your leadership has allowed you to be able to present to us today that notion. Some say the NAACP has given up on workers' rights and focused solely on voting and political rights, and that was it. But I think it's a new day, and I definitely think that it's something that the NAACP has won workers' rights when others weren't. There was a moment where the workers' rights were Black workers' rights specifically, were not being focused on at all, and only the NAACP was at the forefront of those fights, trying to equalize pay between teachers working in a segregated workforce and nurses working in segregated workforce. And so we do have a legacy that we could tap into, despite the fact that we may have lost it along the way. So I hope that we can learn from you today a little bit about organizing for workers' rights and justice for all. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. And I will echo also around, pay. We just celebrated the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County, our 105th anniversary celebration. And part of our history, and here in Anne Arundel, that we should be proud of, Mills, Principal Mills of Mills Parole, was the person who fought to get equal pay for Black teachers and white, to be comparable to white teachers. And was represented by Thurgood Marshall. So that was one of the things we just celebrated, that history of fighting for racial justice and equality and for workers. So I know we have some activists and organizers here in the room. What my goal is to talk about some skills around what we do in unions to organize our workplaces, but it's also what people can take to organize anywhere. I mean, the last panel ended of, we need to be the leaders to fight for whatever the issue is. And so these are skills that are transferable, whether it's your workplace, whether it's tenants in an apartment complex, whether it's residents in a community, in a neighborhood. These are all the same skills that have built up all the movements, whether it's fighting for workers' rights, whether it's fighting for civil rights. They're all transferable, and they're very basic skills, but there's just skills that, we all need to learn. And so hopefully this, we should have two things. You should have a blue sheet that we're going to reference. And as I said, these may be new to some folks. They may be skills that you've heard about, but these are the skills for any movement to be successful. And they may seem very basic, but they take time and they take skill and practice. And I think sometimes in our digital age, we think it should be easier, and it's really just very simple, no shortcuts type of skills to have. So, all right, so next slide. So first, just, unions, just curious, how many people are actually a union member in your workplace? Any? Okay, Keanu? Okay, we got two folks. So one thing is, if you're in a workplace that's not unionized, you can do that, right? There is a rise, as we're seeing, of people realizing the power of unions. Unions had been on the decline, but places like Starbucks and Amazon, places that are very anti-union, we've seen people working to bring unions to those workplaces to improve working conditions. And I also want to lift up, we have 3 relatively new unions right here in Anne Arundel County. Riverhawks is the community college union. There's actually 2 unions. One is for the adjunct professors, one is for the full-time staff. Those are newly unionized. The library union was just formed. They just got their contract. And the McGeo Local 1994, our bus drivers in the school system are privately contracted. 2 of the local private families ended up, I guess, selling their that to a national group, and so those workers in some of the routes ended up unionizing as a private sector, and recently actually just took a strike vote. You might have seen that, and that helped them. They didn't have to go on strike, but just that strike vote helped them because they were fighting for better health care, and that helped them win that and get that into their contract. By doing that, so exactly. So we were happy to sign on a letter of support for their efforts. So those are, both locally and nationally, we're seeing the rise of unions. All right, next. So Jane McAlevey, if you're not familiar with her, she is one of really the pivotal leaders in the union movement. I highly recommend her books. I know it's a little small there, but A Collective Bargain is the book that I first read of hers. She's very inspiring as a union leader, labor movement, and she really knows the skills it takes. In that book, she has a quote that you may not be able to see there, but just what is a union? And it's very simple. It's where workers want to get the boss to do what they want and to not do what they don't want. And that's all it is, right? So you can form a union and have collective bargaining like we do, but even if you're in a workplace without an official union, unions are just groups of workers getting together saying, hey, this is what we want you to do, because this is going to help our working conditions, this is going to make things better. And so it's really just with everything in any movement, getting a group of people together and then making their demands really clear and then having enough of a supermajority to get that done. Next slide. So one of the big tactics that people do is just this march on the boss. And so again, anybody can march on the boss, anybody can get a group of their fellow workers together, whether or not you're formally recognized as a union, to tell your supervisor, to tell your boss, hey, we need to have this happen to make things safer, to make things better, or to stop doing something that's harmful. And the same thing can be done, obviously. You can go to your landlord, that's a boss, an elected official is that boss, and just making sure those demands get met. All right, so next slide. So this quote got cut off a little bit, but I was thinking of Ella Baker. Hopefully we all know Ella Baker. In these movements, it's always the people in the forefront, Martha King and all those folks that really get all the attention. They're the inspiring speakers, but it's people like Ella Baker behind the scenes, the organizer she really believed in people realizing they had the power themselves to save themselves. And every single person is part of that movement, right? MLK can't do what he does if there's not a movement of people showing up at the National Mall when he's making that speech. And so Ella Baker is that person. There is a quick video there, which I don't know if we'll be able to play on the slide, but I don't know if it's possible to play the video, but it's just a quick 2-minute video where she just talks about, and really Ella Baker gets, what does it take to have a movement? People have to talk to each other. You have to like show up and have conversations. And this is the really hard work, but it's really simple work. You just have to talk to people and get people on the same page. And until you have conversations with your fellow workers or your neighbors and try to get people on the same page and change minds, you can't make a movement. You can't make the change you want. All right, next slide. So that gets to, and you have a sheet there. So again, you know, this is talking in a workplace context, but it's something that can be used everywhere. All these resources come from Labor Notes, which is a great organization. These resources are all free. There's a great book called Secrets of a Successful Organizer. I highly recommend it. Really easy, simple chapters with the nuts and bolts of how to organize any workplace, any community to get done what you want to get done. And so this graphic, which I know is hard to read up there, but you can read it on the handout. Anybody who's trying to organize is trying to do a few things, right? The boss, the person in power, they rely on division, fear, a lot of things, apathy, and the organizer is the one who has the conversations to change that. So you're going from people who might be fearful, and you're trying to give them the courage to do something. You're going from the person who feels hopeless, and you're trying to give them hope. You're going from the person, because there's division between things, uniting people together, and trying to go from things where there's confusion, we don't know what to do, to clarity, that you have this plan to win, right? So I'm hoping the people in this room are going to be those organizers and, you know, trying to think about, this is all about like changing people's attitudes. That's the basic thing, that there is hope, there is a way to get something done and to accomplish it. So next slide. So how is this done? As I said, the basic thing is you have to have conversations with people. Even in this digital age, and I'll say, you know, again, we have 6,700 members. That's a lot of people to try to reach out to. And, you know, we often just, you know, when we send emails, we send texts, but it's not until we actually start talking to people one-on-one that you get people on board to do things. So that is very simple, but it is the key to anything. Then there's things like mapping and charting, where you really have to get the scope of your workplace. Who's here? Where are they? What are the departments in that workplace? And figure out who's in the room, who's a member, who's not, who agrees with this, who doesn't. And until you try to like strategize and figure that out, you don't know who you need to talk to. And then last, figuring out who the organic leaders are. Who can you bring to your side? One really quick, or here's another quote from Ella Baker that I really love. Strong people don't need strong leaders. Right? So we're always waiting, we're looking for that leader. Like we ourselves, if we're strong enough and we have these skills, we can do it. We are the leaders as long as we have these skills. Next slide. So this on the back of the paper has this bullseye. So in any workplace, or as I said, tenants in an apartment building, residents in a neighborhood, if there is something that you think is important that's you start to realize is widely felt and deeply felt, and something you want to change, you've got to like know the lay of the land. You have to know who are the people I can rely on to try to start making this change happen. So the first tool is this bullseye, and it's kind of thinking of dividing up that workplace and that neighborhood into 5 categories of people. Who's the core group? You're the one thinking about it, so of course you're going to be part of that strategy and organizing. Who are some of the other people who will help strategize and organize with you? Then the next are, who are your activists? Who are the people that you know if you start talking to, they're going to start doing things and helping things to happen? And then the third, who are the supporters? Who are the people when you say, okay, you got to show up to this thing, you got to sign this petition, who's going to do that? And then there's people who are like, I don't think so. I don't think this is important. I don't really care. They're off to the side. They're disengaged. And then you've got some people sometimes who are hostile. They actively don't agree. They're going to try to, push against that. And so that's the first part of this charting, is figuring out who are those folks. And then, of course, the goal is to shift those people along, right? Getting the people who are disengaged, having those conversations so you can move them along. I don't know how much time we have, but I was going to give people, I got time? I just was going to give people a moment, right? So we all have things we care about. We showed up today because we want to learn about making change in some ways. Even this last panel around the police accountability, one of the things they talked about is people have to file the complaints. And I was like, okay, if I'm in a neighborhood where I know the police are harassing me and my neighbors, I've got to start talking to people so that we start filing the complaints so things can get done, right? Like, that's the first step to even making a change. That might be the campaign that you work on. So I want everyone to think a moment, is it a workplace you're trying to organize? Is it a neighborhood? What would be the thing that you would want to take these skills back to try to organize? And try to start thinking in this little bullseye for a couple minutes, like, who are the people in your neighborhood, in your workplace, who support you, support this effort? Maybe there's question marks, and maybe who might be the people who are hostile to it that you would have to convince. So I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes. What would be your organizing campaign and effort? And if you have a pen or a pencil, maybe fill out a few things on that bullseye. Does anybody want to share? Is there something that you think, hey, in my workplace or in my neighborhood, this is the thing that I want to organize? And it could be something simple, like we need to fix the sidewalks, or there's a light that's not working in our neighborhood, to obviously something more serious and complex like policing. Is there anything?
Cool, thank you. Yeah, my name is Carlos Childs. I'm with Arundel Connecting Together, but one of the things that we're working on is fixing a school student pedestrian safety issue, where you have a few neighborhoods where kids have to walk to school because they're in the 1.5 mile radius range, but there are no sidewalks or safe routes to the school from their neighborhood. So working with the residents in that neighborhood to come together, the parents of not only children who go to the middle school, but high school parents and also expecting parents, so that they all can galvanize around this issue in their neighborhood.
All right, awesome. All right. Anybody else want to share?
Hello, my name is Stephen Waddy. One of the issues that I'm organizing around is rental affordability, and there are a core group of people that are working with us to achieve rent affordability in Annapolis, and because there's a lot of unaffordable rent. And we have some activists. Do you want me to run through who, or? Oh, okay, yeah, that's it. Rent affordability is one campaign that I'll be working on. And I know that the hostility would generally come from landlords. Landlords are going to be hostile to not being able to raise rent. And if we work towards making sure that landlords cannot hoard housing, they will also be hostile to them being forced to put vacant properties up for rent. So you can't artificially influence the market due to the fact that you have a monopoly or own a larger amount of property. Disengaged. There's a lot of disengaged renters. people who might be the most influenced are feeling apathetic, and they don't want to get involved. They just pay their bills and move on. Supporters, I would think, would be people who are paying, like, who said that earlier, the rent is too high? I believe that was our previous panel, Martin. So yeah, he's also an activist.
And I was just going to say, so you're actually moving with the hostility about the landlords too. That's another level of like power mapping where you start to realize, okay, we know what our campaign is. Who do we got to get, to change? Who are the different players that are going to be resistant or in that campaign? In the sense of this, would there be any renters? Because if the goal is to get all these renters on the same page, especially if it's a particular building or a set of buildings owned by the same place, right, the same company, are there still going to be renters who might say, well, I'm glad the rent's this, because maybe if it got too low, there's going to be people that they might, that whole like NIMBY thing, right? Like, oh, who are we going to let in if it gets, so those people within the group that then, how do we have a conversation? Because we want a super majority of the people in that building or working, renters from that company to all be telling the company, you need to change the rents. Right, so how do you convince the people within there to get to that supermajority? But yeah, well, there's power mapping too. Do you want to add to that? Or did you have another example? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So my example would be reversing DEI and Project 2038 that would cover reversing DEI and all the initiatives that really are anti-equity. And so I guess the hostility would be, and also I would add to that, just like people are going around with these Turning Point USA chapters all over the campuses, and we need the Anne Arundel County NAACP chapters all over the country. All over the country, and Anne Arundel County, so that the campus can feel that energy. The campus can know we exist. The campus can know that our ideas are still shared. We're still fighting equity. We're still fighting the good fight. We're still the people that branched from, the late Dr. King and his ideas and his efforts to achieve civil rights. We shouldn't be going backwards on voting rights. That's crazy. And so we need that type of those types of supporters. The disengaged are people that don't vote. The disengaged are people who don't want to be activists. And the activists would be the NAACP people, the members, and so on. So that's kind of where I think, and the core group would be the ones that are all in.
All right.
I'm Commissioner Tracy Parker Warren of the Maryland Workers' Compensation Commission, and one issue that's near and dear to my heart are people that get hurt at work. And you might not be surprised to know that lots of those people are teachers. I think that injured workers obviously are the core group that care, and they're also activists for themselves and for their coworkers. And obviously, I think they support the charge. I think that people that are disengaged are people that are no longer in the workforce or maybe too young to really be actively involved in the workforce. As it pertains to people that are hostile, it's interesting because one might naturally think that it would be the employer or the insurance company, and sometimes that is the case, but oftentimes the employer and the insurance company are also in the business of sort of making sure, being more proactive, making sure that such accidents don't happen in the first place. As it pertains to teachers, one thing that really concerns me is the increasing amount of violence in the schools, not only with the students, but with other teachers, or I've even seen situations where there's some type of social on school property and family members of a student become violent with a teacher. So those are the things that, really are on my mind. In my role, I'm very neutral, and I listen to both the employer, the insurance company, and the injured worker, but maybe just for it to be on everyone's radar that these sort of things do happen, and these workers need our support. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm going to talk about it later in my presentation. So yes, it is an issue here. Did you want to? Okay. All right. So that's your first step, is to start thinking about that. As I said, the next goal, and actually next slide, is once you kind of map out kind of where people are, then you really need to, next slide. Well, and actually in here, so this is, I don't have this as a handout. This gets a little bit more into the nuances, but the next step would be to actually map that workplace or that neighborhood. So where you literally are writing down every single place, or that apartment complex, wherever it is you're trying to take that action. And so you actually physically draw out, like in a school, the entire school and all the classrooms, where is everybody? Or the neighborhood. Who are all the neighbors? Do we know their names? Sorry, they're live streaming, so. Do they know, do we know the names of the people? Do we even know who all the neighbors are? Do we even know all the people in the workplace? And actually mapping it out both physically, like a visual of that place, and then charting. Because then as you're building your campaign, you start to think, okay, who is on board? Who have we talked to? And who do we need to have a conversation with? Either to get them on board, or if we know they're hostile to this, how do we change their mind? And so you're actually like mapping that out. As I said, there's a lot of like resources on Labor Notes that has all the, things where you can download and get a lot of like exercises and resources around all that. But it's really knowing as well as possible. So even with the thing like, DEI, which is huge, because we're talking really national movement, which is where we're building to. Because every time somebody in a workplace or in a neighborhood gets something done, when you get the sidewalks so that your kids can, get to school safely, that small thing for that small community, part of everything in organizing is we're teaching people that they have the ability, that they have the agency to make change. And if we want to save democracy, if we want to fight back at the rollbacks to, racial justice in this country and all the rollbacks that we're seeing, to get there, everybody has to believe that they can make the change. And so all of the organizing efforts, even in the smallest ways, is really building people's sense of empowerment. Again, we're all here because we already know that we can make change, but it's how do we help every person in our workplace, every single neighbor feel the same way. And so just kind of thinking about that, every organizing, every action, everything is an organizing opportunity for something bigger when things get harder and tougher in these bigger battles. All right, next slide. So one of the key things that you have to do, and this is sometimes hard, sometimes the person who's the activist, who's the excited person, is not really the person who can talk and change every neighbor's mind. So one of the big things we're always looking for is who in a workplace or who in the neighborhood is really the organic, natural leader who's going to be able to talk to those toughest people and get them on our side. Who are the people who really move people to action? That's a really hard thing, and it's not always the person who volunteers. We need the people who volunteer, we need the activists who show up every single time, but they may not be the person who's going to be able to go into that workplace and get people to, join the union, take the action against the boss. But somebody is that person in that building, in that school, work site, in that neighborhood where everybody listens to them. They are the trusted, respected person. And sometimes those people are even the hostile people who don't even agree with your campaign. But you have to be able to talk to them and have conversations and get them to understand, and hopefully flip them so that they're on your side. So that's one of the big things. It's not necessarily the person with the title. It's not the person who always shows up necessarily. It might be, but there's a core group of people who are the organic leaders, and that's what we're always looking for. Because in the end, when we're trying to do really hard change, like something that requires a lot of funding, speaking of schools, when it's trying to push back against the rollbacks of DEI, we know the momentum's going in one direction. The only way to push it back is to get super majorities of people standing up. All right, next slide. So that's where this part is, and you have a script. So this is what organizers use. AAHUY is the acronym, AHUY. So anytime you talk to people, there's like 4 key things you got to do. Because you're fired up about this. Not everybody necessarily is fired up. Everybody's busy, they've got things to do, bills to pay, family to take care of. But you need everybody in that workplace or in that neighborhood to be as energized around this as you are, as you think is important. Especially if it's something that you know is widely felt. But you got to get people on board with whatever the action is that you're taking. So the first thing you want to do is you got to, well, here they use the word for build up a little bit of anger. Another word we like to say is agitate. You got to remind people about the injustice of whatever this issue is and have a conversation. And then you got to give people hope. You have to have a clear plan, like, this is the thing we need you to do, and this is going to help change that thing that you're upset about. And you got to give them some urgency. We got to go now. We got to go and do this thing. We got to show up here, and we got to do it by this deadline. And then last, you got to make it clear that they are the person who can make the difference. They can't rely on you and say, well, you just take care of it. Because if you could have taken care of it, you would have done it. It would have already happened. You need all of the people. And so this is just a very easy script. Obviously, you don't want to be robotic about it. But I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to look at that. And again, for the thing that you care about, what would be the things you would say if you were talking one-on-one where you knew you had to get that person? They're either the disengaged person who's not doing anything, maybe they're even the supporter, but they're just not doing. How do you get them to do that? So take a couple minutes and look at these different steps. What would you say about the issue you care about? What would be the action? And especially if you can think about, what is the particular action I think a group of people could do right now to make a change for that thing? And what would I say to them? So let's take a couple minutes. All right, so for the sake of time, so you've got the script now. This is really the basic nuts and bolts to make any change that you need to make, at least as a beginning starting point. That script is a thing that works, going through that. Those are the one-on-one conversations. And that's how you get whatever group of people that you want to get to do something to make that change, right? Again, Labor Notes has a lot of great resources to help with this. And again, this is the stuff that we do within our union, but it's applicable really at anywhere to make change. So next. So I want to kind of tie in, I'm coming from the teachers union, the educators union. NAACP is working on racial justice. One of the things, and I love the conversation about DEI, this idea, when we're fighting for things, as workers, yes, we can be fighting for kind of the bread and butter salaries and working conditions for that person at that workplace. And that is really important, and that is definitely what we do. But then there's the larger issues as well that we're also fighting for. And there's a thing called bargaining for the common good. Because when we're fighting for things, especially in public education, we're not just fighting for ourselves as educators. One of the things we say is educators' working conditions are students' learning conditions, right? So when I'm fighting to have, I'm a high school English teacher. When I'm fighting for lower class sizes, that's so, because last year I was teaching, I had for most of the year over 180 students. That's high school students grading essays. How can I give the individualized attention to all the students with those class sizes? So when we're fighting for lower class sizes, which helps my workload, that's also helping students to get that more individualized attention. These things are interconnected, right? Where the students come from in the community, and if they're dealing with food insecurity in the community, that's gonna, when then they come to school, it's hard to learn and focus if you're, hungry because you didn't have breakfast that morning, right? So these things are very interconnected. I just put some of the different things that we have been fighting for, different things that are important. And so this is where we as a community taking these organizing skills for us as a union, but also for us as a whole community. Community schools is one good example of something we fought legislatively. Hopefully people are familiar with that, but that is putting a lot of new funding into schools where there's a high concentration of poverty, so that the students at those schools are getting wraparound services. So there might be a food pantry now at that school, so those kids are getting food, and that food might be going to their family, so that it's not just being fed during the school day, but now the family has food to help that student. So every community school assesses what are the needs of that community. So why are the kids not coming to school if we have like an attendance issue? What is the issue, and then how do we use this community school funding to address that issue so kids can start coming to school, or whatever the happen to be. If it's a lot of Spanish-speaking families, okay, there might be some language barriers. How do we help address that so families feel connected and supported by the school, and building that stronger connection obviously helps students. Obviously if there's gun violence in a community and kids are dealing with the trauma of that and then they come into school, well, that's going to make it hard for them to learn. So these are things that we're working on, affordable housing, as was brought up. Again, and these are things that affect us as workers because many educators can't afford to live in this county, and that creates stress to workers. It's hard to pay, your bills, and now you have a longer commute. And it's better if educators live in the community, but also for our students. If they're in transient homes, if they can't, don't have stability, again, that stress makes it very hard for them to be ready to learn. So one of the things, and I love that we're partnering with the NAACP more, we really want to have community allies. So there is a QR code there. It's also on the half sheet of paper. We have just hired a community organizer. We're going to be working to build more connections to the community so that as we look at these larger issues that interconnect with public education, the priorities of the NAACP, racial justice, that we have support. So I hope people will sign on as a community ally with us. We'll be doing newsletters to get that out there. and so that the community has information about what schools need and how it connects to these larger issues of justice for all. Next slide. So a couple of things just about state legislation. It was brought up about the workers. One of the things that we fought for is the Davis-Martinez Act. Recently, speaking of injuries, which has definitely been a significant thing, especially in our early elementary school, or our elementary school in the early grades. We helped to fight for the Davis-Martinez Act, which is helping all public sector workers to have safety and more transparency and reporting around that. So that legislation just passed. That was one of the things we lobbied around. Things like the ESP Bill of Rights are education support professionals. Those are folks like the teaching assistants, custodians, food service workers. They're not in tax bargaining unit, but they are represented within our school district, and those are often our lower paid workers. So we are fighting to make sure that they get a $25 minimum wage. And as we know, when unions fight for higher pay for themselves, that helps lift everybody up, and salaries go up for everybody. Blueprint is another thing. It's the funding for that. Again, community schools is one of the big things where that money is going. We know it's a tight budget year with the legislature, but we want to keep the funding. Last year there was some effort to pull back on the community schools funding. We pushed back against that to keep it going. The other things that the Blueprint funds is pre-K, again, helping kids have access to early education, which gives them a strong foundation moving forward. And for our upper level students, career and technical education and pathways to that, so that kids when they graduate high school have access to better jobs in training and skills to be more successful. Next. So an immediate fight that I hope we can all be part of in our organizing efforts is funding for schools. Right now, Dr. Bedell, our superintendent of schools, is working on the school budget. It's going to be released December 17th, and we're really hoping that we get more staffing and more funding so that we can serve all of our students, our special education students, which we are sorely behind on the staff we need for that. Again, speaking of the injuries in early elementary school, we are missing teaching assistants, TSAs, and all these behavioral support. We need the funding for all that. We're hoping to have, support to make sure that we, this is a community effort, and this is where at least some of our organizing efforts are. There are budget hearings on January 6th and 8th. So, having family and community members speaking for the need for this funding and helping to make sure students have the resources at school and the access to a public education is really important to us. And I'm sure I know it's important to the NAACP. And next, so this just kind of shows a little bit of the timeline of where the budget process is. And again, 6th and 8th are where community members can show up. Stuart Pittman has some town halls, January and February. We need community members also there. Again, staffing is just so critical for kids to have the access to the education they need. All right, and next slide. And then, and again, I know we're short on time, but just dismantling of the Department of Ed, again, when we talk about these larger issues from the federal level, again, we're asking people to sign on as community allies, because to push back on these bigger fights, we need lots of the community pushing back. The Department of Education obviously helps with Title I funding, which is for communities that are low income, and giving the resources. The Office of Civil Rights to make sure kids have access to a public education is part of the Department of Ed. Special education funding is part of that, and even access to student loans. You might have heard recently there was a whole effort of classifying people, so educators are not considered getting professional degrees, nursing, there's a bunch of healthcare folks, and if you don't have a professional degree, you can't get as much student loan funding. So that's going to impact not only those professions, but people having access to the student loans. So there's a lot of issues going on with Department of Ed. And again, the more that we have community support, there are 2 QR codes where you can send some emails saying that you want to make sure the Department of Ed stays there. It's on the half sheets that you've been given. And then ultimately, this all kind of connects to November 26 elections. And again, that's why we need organizing and community support, because we need pro-public education people in place. We need people who support racial justice elected in an office. And so, you know, if you sign on as a community ally with us, we'll be giving you resources and information and in our newsletters so that we can, you know, be working collectively as an entire community to support these things and keep things in place instead of having the rollbacks. And last slide. All right, so as I said, that's for the community ally sign up. It's on the half sheet. I appreciate your time. I know we're over, so I hope it's okay. All right.
Thank you. Clap it up, please. Thank you. We have gotten so much legislation that we have to pay attention to that we will be sending it out to you all so that you know the housing, the police accountability, and the education and workers' rights related legislation that we need to be focusing on for the upcoming session and in the future at both the state and federal levels. And we do have another state delegate that has joined us. Delegate Dylan Baylor is here. So raising hand, he's waving. And we got Annapolis City Council member Keanu Smith Brown is here as well. Raise your hand, Keanu. Yes, thank you. And everybody knows you. Everybody don't know you. Oh, well, we got. I'm sorry, delegate. Come on, delegate, raise your hand as well, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So our were there any questions? Did y'all have any questions as well? No questions. Okay. Well, you, Kristina, I thank you. Do you see DEI in the schools being a larger issue? I know one of the things that a lot of Black teachers are concerned about is how their jobs are going to be affected in the post-Charlie Kirk era. Can't even talk about a white supremacist who got shot, and so by another white supremacist. So that's been a major concern, and I'm wondering whether or not you have seen that concern as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're all concerned about, you know, all of these rollbacks. I will say, I mean, I think we're very fortunate, at least in Anne Arundel County, because you can even look at surrounding districts and what, you know, Calvert County, for example, they rolled back their anti-racism policy. You know, there's book bans, you know, even though we did fight to pass the Freedom to Read bill, but one of our neighboring counties tried to even ban a book. So, yeah, I mean, the idea of having access to, you know, education for educators to be able to, you know, teach accurate history. I mean, all of those things are definitely a concern. I think a lot of it is, you know, unfortunately just a chilling effect coming from the federal government. And so educators are fearful and wondering. Again, I will just say, I think in Anne Arundel County, we have been fortunate because we do have right now the right elected leaders in place in many ways to make sure that we're not being told, like within the school system itself, that you can't, you know, talk about these certain things. But you know, we know there's a federal push to make that happen, and that's why continuing to have the right people in place, because we're seeing in our surrounding districts, it doesn't feel the same way. And then certainly when you go and look outside of the state, you know, you talk to somebody from Florida, I mean, you wouldn't want to be a teacher there right now. It's a really fearful environment. So, but that chilling factor is definitely there. And that's why we need the community always speaking up if there's any pushbacks to that, and making sure that our school board members have the resolve, that they don't, you know, get, you know, feel the pressure themselves. But I think, you know, we're in a much better position than our neighboring people. I
feel surrounded the way you described it, though. Oh my gosh. one of the areas that we saw that as well at the within the NAACP, especially over the past few years, was when we had Corinne Frank on the school board, and members of the NAACP filed a petition to have her removed from the school board. And at the state level, there is no provision to have people who are openly against public education being on a school board. So then using their power to kind of undermine every initiative associated with school safety. When we're talking about anti-masking, they were anti-masks. And then we're talking about free speech, they were being anti-critical race theory, making up ways that Black history was connected with the destruction of society and all this. And then there was a third issue, I can't remember per se, but all of them were aspects at the state level that we had an advocacy that was engaged, and we also passed a resolution here at the local branch around that issue. So do you see at the state level being there being an opportunity to address some of these free speech concerns?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we're going to be lobbying. I mean, again, Freedom to Read Act was, one thing that I'm glad we put in place. That's, as we're going through our endorsements, I mean, we want to make sure we have people at the state level who are going to be standing strong against all of these pushbacks, because, I mean, that's what we have to have. And I think that's why we in Maryland haven't been feeling, especially in Anne Arundel. Again, there are surrounding counties where that's not the case, but we've elected the right people. But that's why these elections are critical, because at any point they can swing back. And people did know, in the efforts, a lot of these efforts were at the local level, because, the opposition paid attention to the school board races and these smaller races. And, the folks here who want to push for and make sure racial justice and all these things are moving forward have to realize every single race from the bottom to the top of the ballot matters. And again, luckily, we've got 6 of our 7 endorsed candidates put on the school board. It's important because every one of those decisions matters.
Do you see the student school board member losing their voting rights, their full voting rights? Anne Arundel County has a student school board member that has full voting rights. Do you see that happen?
I don't see that happening. I know there was a recent, op-ed about that, but people are very proud of that. And I think over the years we have seen, we've had school board members sometimes being really the strong voice of making sure things are moving forward. I can think of one of our former ones, Drake Smith, who was actually a student of mine. That's when the Black Lives Matter resolution was passed. I don't know exactly, but, and he was really leading the charge. So I think, some people question it, but I think we've seen really strong student members, and so I don't think that's going to be rolled back.
So Drake was also the president of the Youth and College Division for the NAACP, and my daughter in the crowd was a member under his reign of leadership before he went off to Lincoln University. She's at Howard now, so clap it up for my daughter, Mackenzie. Thank you. Drake's leadership, I think, was something that was kind of forced upon him, I would say. Drake had to fight against, he was, from what I recall, he was the leader of the equity committee on the school board. And so he was 17 years old, high school student, who was, the only Black male that was forced, from my, opinion, other people, he definitely volunteered. Drake is an amazing person. However, when you're like if you're not the only Black person, you are forced to kind of represent Black people in every space. And I think Drake did that wonderfully. So I think that there's an opportunity for others to step up, especially, some of the 6 of the 7 endorsed candidates that you all have to step up and speak on behalf of the Black students and the Black teachers and the Black communities that are being segregated housing-wise, being segregated academically into even special ed when they shouldn't be, being segregated into places that, you know, they shouldn't be. I think one of the biggest issues that we also had was around student suspensions, and this was under the previous school superintendent, not the current one, who was great on those issues, especially, and he's also great on special ed. But those concerns that were around the high arrest rate was another thing that we were organizing around. So if you had any other closing words, I'd appreciate it. If anybody, you guys said you didn't have any questions, but I definitely appreciate you if you want to have any other.
No, I guess I'll just say, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, there's many things that we can be partnering with. I'm really glad for this partnership with NAACP and this opportunity to speak and to use these organizing efforts, because as I said, it's important that, yes, we are as a union fighting for our own internal, working conditions, salaries, but this is really about the whole Anne Arundel County community, and the more that we're united together in these times, it's really critical that we have mass movements of people, that we're talking to our neighbors, that we're talking to people who disagree with us, and who don't understand or don't see it, and getting those people on board. Because that's the only way, as we're seeing these pushbacks happening, the only way is to build mass movements. And we know the civil rights movement, we saw the success of that. And again, I'll just say it's the people, Ella Baker knew how to do it. And it's just simple, like it's conversations. And we have to talk to people who don't agree. We have to get outside of the bubble of the folks who agree with us, but talking to our neighbors. And this is why workplaces are important, because you just show up to your workplace. You don't necessarily agree on politics or on racial social justice issues, but you've got that person that you work with every day, that you have a relationship with, that you can talk to. It's the same thing in our neighborhoods, right? We know here we're all on the same page, but our neighbors aren't necessarily, and so we have to talk to those folks, and it's hard, but that is the only way we're gonna make change, and right now is the time we have to do it. So just be willing to have those hard conversations and talk to those folks, because it is possible to change people's minds and to get people on board, and to inspire people who don't feel right now that they can make a difference, because there's a lot of hopelessness and kind of feeling of just accepting that this stuff is happening. And the more that we push back and we're able to have some agency and give some hope, that's how we stop it. And that's how we make sure we keep the momentum going that we had just a few years ago. And so we can do it again. So thanks again for the opportunity.
A token of our appreciation. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have our final agenda item regarding the Black Agenda, and it's a listening session for those of us here to be able to hear some of the concerns that you all have and some of the issues that you have at the top of your agenda to make sure we know what to carry into 2026.